All of the coolest dice sets I have ever made in my life were accidents, and I have further proof of that to submit as evidence. When it comes to Dungeons and Dragons characters, for me, the more interesting, the better. So I was really excited when my friend Wendy reached out to me about doing a commission for her new character, which is a Shadar-Kai Way of the Elements monk. As if this wasn't already a super interesting character concept, now I get to turn it into a super interesting dice concept. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Sam, but you just said this dice is cool because it was an accident. Yes, I did. Because even though I have this super awesome, fun character concept to work with, I am lazy. And when I realized I was going to be making lots of different dice designs to put into one set, rather than making 7 individual dice molds like I should have, I just decided to mix everything together in one mold because obviously that wasn't going to create a bunch of problems. I started with fire. It's always a really good place to start when I'm doing anything elemental. I started by adding in this really cool Angelina fiber, and then I layered a dark red translucent resin with a dark orange translucent resin. There are also a couple different shades of fiery glitter. I have one that's a little bit more white but shifts red, and then there's also one in here that's just straight up red, because glitter and mylar and orange and red obviously equals fire, and I'm actually jazzed with how gorgeous this final dark red turned out. After doing the 2 dice for red, I decided to do the D20 and the D6, by the way. I moved on to the next element, which was wind. For wind, I wanted to mix up a little bit of that Pinata White Blanco Blanco. It's the thickest, creamiest white resin dye or alcohol ink that I have found thus far for white. So I started by mixing that up, and then I took some clear translucent resin and added in some very fine, light powdered blue glitter. I added that into the 2 slots that I chose to be the wind dice, which was the D4 and the D8. Again, I'm just trying to keep similar pairings together so I don't mix these all up. Next came the leaves, because how else do you represent a gust of wind? I don't know, probably lots of ways. But for me, I thought about leaves and flowers being tossed around in a breeze. So to the 2 slots where I added that translucent glitter, I just added in a couple of different leaves and flowers. This is just like a paper leaf design that I bought for fall a couple years back, but I really like the way they look in dice, and the size is perfect. So after adding those to that clear resin, I topped it off with a little bit more of the clear sparkly resin and then just swirled in some of that heavy white on the back of a toothpick. I didn't want to use very much because, again, it's just supposed to be wind gusts, so I didn't want to get carried away. After wind, it was time to move on to water. Water's probably my favorite element. I'm a Pisces, and I scream that. I also grew up in the water, and my daughter's a water baby. So I love doing watery dice. I recently posted one of my first ever dice pours that I attempted to do water vibes. And this dice is a really fun example of how I've improved in that method, because I did it kind of the same way. I used a dark translucent resin dye with a little bit of blue glitter and added that into the 2 slots. First, I did the D6 and the D12. Then I added directly into it a drop of that Pinata White Blanco Blanco, and then topped it off with more of the clear, translucent, sparkly blue. I didn't do anything else to it. No swirls, nothing. Just added it right on top of that Blanco Blanco, and then topped it all off with a little bit of clear at the very end, mostly because I ran out of blue, to be honest with you. But the blue was pretty heavy, so I was confident that this was all I needed. Last but certainly not least, we are moving on to earth. I decided to do the D10 and the D percentile for the earth part of this pour, and I am using a bronze mica powder. I thought a plain brown resin dye would look really boring, so I started with a little bit of clear resin, and then I added this bronze mica powder right on top of it. And then after those were filled almost to the top, I just sprinkled on a little bit of this powdered gold and black foil mixture that I usually use to represent ash, but I thought it might have a similar effect to dirt, so that's kind of what you see me doing here. Now, I'm sure you've noticed there are empty slots in this mold. When I make molds, I shove them full of Dice Masters, so I always have bonus singles, and all of those little bonus spots do have to be filled up, because otherwise when the mold pressurizes, all of the dice that are empty will like suck in and it'll cause all the other dice to warp. So whenever you have extra dice in a mold that you don't necessarily need for the pour, you still need to fill them with either an actual die or just use some random resin, which is what I did. I just filled those slots up with whatever I had. Now, you see me doing an extra D20 here. Wendy's a good friend of mine, and honestly, this dice commission took way too long, so I am including a bonus D20 for free. And I know that she really loves the way I do my water pours, so I decided the bonus D20 would be a water element, so that in the end, she'll have a D20 for fire and a D20 for water. Here you see me just making sure all of those little extra dice openings are filled up on my mold. I had mostly white and clear left at this point, I believe. So that's kind of what you see happening in these extra mold slots. As always, I add a little bit of clear resin to the top of my mold before I put the lid on. I pour really heavy-handedly, so I probably don't need to do this. I'm just paranoid, and I always feel like I'm going to have voids if I don't do it, so I just do it. And also, I didn't really have enough resin left to make anything else with anyway, so why not just load up the cap and feel like I did my part in not wasting any resin. I did pop bubbles with my heat gun. It was super cold the day I poured this set, and the resin was already getting really thick, so I knew a lighter was not going to pop those bubbles. And then into the pressure pot to hang out for 24 hours with a heat band because it was freezing, and this resin would have never cured if I didn't have a heat band on that pressure pot. Now, remember how I talked about this was an accident? Yeah, I am actually an intelligent person, and I probably knew that all of these colors were going to mix together into the different slots. Why would I ever think that the blue would just stay with blue, and the red would stay with red, and the white would stay with white? That's silly. I've been doing this for a long time. But this is the air D4, and it is just supposed to be blue with white swirls and leaves. You see it here with the D8 as well. But look at how cool it looks with that red bleeding in. The fire dice came out mostly unscathed. They're pretty dark, so any other colors that seeped into them wouldn't have shown up. And the water ones also turned out pretty good. There is a little bit of red in this D6, but it is a bonus D6. Here's another shot of a red fire one, virtually unscathed. It's just fire. Fire burns away all the other elements, I suppose. The earth dice are really cool because one has some red for fire and the other has some blue for the water. And then, of course, the D20 for the water is completely unscathed because it was in a separate mold. I was not sure how Wendy was going to feel about this, but she loves them, which is awesome because I love them too. It almost feels like the monk is like weaving the elements in between all of the dice, and I'm really stoked for that vibe. So I'm really excited to get these polished and inked up, and I am going to do that in a later video because I want to show you how I'm going to do that. If you liked this video, please click like. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, please subscribe and make sure you ring that notification bell and you will be notified every time I post a new video. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you so soon. Bye!